Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5 Episode 7 Fully Dilated. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks. So I have to start with the spoiler warning for Lower Decks up to Season 5 Episode 7. If you have not seen up to this episode, you will not want to watch this video. Otherwise, some things will be spoiled for you. So I really like this one. I thought this was maybe, it didn't wow me. I'm not ready to call it one of the best of the show, but I think it was a pretty good episode. It was a really strong character story. It was really kind of simplistic, it wasn't anything too crazy or out there or overloaded with jokes or anything like that. It was just kind of a nice little simple first contact or not first contact, more like, under disguise kind of, being in a primitive culture kind of thing. And yeah, you got to know, Tendi in particular. It was a good use of her, and T'Lyn, which two of them we haven't actually seen all that much this season. Tendi has kind of been in the background ever since the Orion episodes, so it was good to see her front and center. It was a good use for her as well. Now, granted, the storyline was kind of cliche. It was kind of your typical thing where two people up for the same job, and Tendi thinks is being really competitive and thinks she's always being outdone by T'Lyn, and it turns out that T'Lyn actually didn't really care, didn't even notice that about being competitive or anything like that, but she just wanted to be friends with Tendi, which is usually Tendi's thing of wanting to be friends with her. So it kind of showed how the relationship grows. So yeah, even though it was kind of your typical competitive thing and whatever that you'd see in sitcoms and whatnot, it was actually used well to develop these characters more and show how they've grown and how their friendship has grown. So yeah, it was actually, even though it was kind of typical, it was used in a not so typical way and more to delve deeper into their characters, especially, which is really good to see, especially since they've been underutilized a bit this season. So it was interesting though that the whole up for the same job thing reminded me, because I just watched the TNG episode Lower Decks, and it kind of reminded me of that when Sam Levine and Ensign Cito were up for the same job. They were both up for the same promotion. Now in that case, they weren't being overly competitive with each other. They just both felt kind of weird because they're friends and they're both up for the same job and only one of them would get it. But there's only a slight similarity of that, but I have no doubt that the showrunner stated before that the whole show is modeled off of that episode. I mean, it's called the same thing, so I wouldn't be surprised if that had crossed their minds when they were writing this episode, but it wasn't the same. Like, as I said, it felt a bit more original than that. It wasn't just a repeat of what happened. It was different enough where there's only a slight similarity between them. So yeah, so that was a good thing. Now the whole thing about them having to go undercover with Mariner. And I also loved Mariner. She was more of the comic relief, and it's good because usually she's the main character for the past several episodes. It's all been about her, which I've enjoyed her character development this season. And here we see more of that, where she's almost taking the Tendi role of being really upbeat and sort of happy about everything, and oh, this is gonna be cool kind of thing. So it's kind of interesting, and Tendi started getting and aggro and everything like that. So it was actually really interested to see the role reversal there. And yeah, and I like the use of Mariner in this episode, even though, yeah, she was mainly comic relief. But I love all the Star Trek references. We get bombarded with a lot of references. First of all, They're mentioning, the planet being in a time dilation where a week passes for every second on the Cerritos. And I love how, Boimler just says that very casually. Like, oh yeah, by the way, when they're getting ready to beam down, that felt a bit inauthentic to me, but whatever. It's lower decks. Yeah, I love how when they mentioned that, I can't remember who it was, but someone, maybe it was Tendi, said, yeah, I think it was Tendi who said, it's like that Voyager, that shouldn't say Voyager episode, but the time that Voyager encountered that planet where time was moving very fast, and of course that's also what I thought of. But again, it's not like copying that episode. It's a similar situation, but the episode itself is totally different. In fact, one of my sort of things I felt was kind of disappointing about that episode. That is one of my favorite episodes of Voyager. It's also a fan favorite. But one of the things I found a bit disappointing about it was that we didn't actually get to see our crew spend any time on the planet. The Doctor went there and something similar happened. Well, it wasn't like the transporter officer B'Elanna didn't spill drinks on the console, but there was a malfunction or something and they lost them, and it took a couple minutes to fix, which for him was 3 years. So he was on the planet for 3 years and apparently got a son and fell in love and all this. And that was kind of one of my disappointments, is that we didn't actually see that on screen. They just told us about it in dialogue, which I think is kind of a missed opportunity. So here we actually do get to see the crew spend time and being stuck on the planet. And yeah, you had that competition storyline with Tendi and T'Lyn, and how T'Lyn was just being so successful and growing all this food, and it was being huge and going to sell it at the market, and then she made her own beauty products. And of course they had that, it was very, stereotypical of storylines like this, where there's this creepy guy who's being suspicious and lurking, but they called out that cliche though, which I liked. There's why is there always a creepy guy or lurker in these Carbon Creek situations, which of course is a shout out to the Enterprise episode of Carbon Creek, where the Vulcans were spending time on Earth pre First Contact. And yeah, how would she know about that? I don't know. maybe she heard the story from DePaul or whatever. But anyway, all these Enterprise stuff, I get that she would know about those adventures. But yeah, and I think I can't remember what other callbacks. I'm sure we got more callbacks in this episode. I know that they mentioned the of course, the inner light. Oh, I love that. That was the funniest part of the episode. All the inner light references, where Mariner was I gotta go out and live a whole life, and you don't have as much time as Picard did. And she's I gotta make the best of it. I gotta find a bestie. And she was trying really hard to to make friends, and she just ended up getting thrown in jail repeatedly, which I did think was kind of funny. And she tried to learn how to play this soap flute or whatever. And it was really funny when she played that at the end, and then she did make friends with all the other people in jail, and they're I'm a murderer, and so is he. I was I don't need to know about that. And then she's at the end, even mentioned, I miss my jail friends. So that was done more a comedic route, but it worked. It was funny. I think it was, and and this whole episode, I think, felt a really heartfelt. I think it was really effective that way. And yeah, the whole thing with Smells or whatever his name is, who's lurking, it's also hilarious. Sometimes when they would play it off the sneaky music, and he'd go dun dun, oh, he's up to something, and then Mariner would just smack him and be get the hell out of here, Smells, stop lurking. That was great. So yeah, it was a pretty funny episode as well. And then, of course, the whole thing with Boimler and Rutherford spilling, or was Boimler mainly spilled the drink all over the couch. It was a bit ridiculous when they started like licking it. Like there could have been better ways to clean it up. I'm sure. I mean, they're in the 24th century. Surely there's some futuristic technology that would just instantly clean it up. But I did find it funny. Like, just especially when they first spilled it and they just started screaming, ah! And also, you think that there would be backups. Like, isn't there another transporter room on the Cerritos? There's like several on the Enterprise. Why don't they just call another transporter room? And surely, like, there's other ways. Even if there's not another transporter room, there's some ways they could use like cargo, like shuttlecraft transporters. There'd be other ways to transport them back up. They should have just called the bridge. And surely the bridge would have noticed that, they should have noticed. I know it's just a couple, like, minutes for them, but still, like, they should know that the officers should just beam in and beam out. They should be able to tell that something's wrong. But anyway, so that, I'm overthinking it, I know. But it doesn't really bother me because I did, and it's just a ridiculous thing, but it is still kind of funny seeing them licking the council. But yeah, and of course I got to talk about Data. Have to talk about Data. I wasn't sure or not if that was actually Brent Spiner, because it didn't sound like Data, but that's probably just because Brent Spiner has aged and his voice sounds different than it did 35 years ago, because I was just been watching TNG and I was trying to match the voice to Data and I just couldn't do it, so I wasn't even sure if it was, but then I looked in the credits and sure enough it was, so I was like, oh cool, they actually did get him back. Well, that's good. But yeah, it was a good use of Data. The whole thing with like the purple Enterprise, was kind of fun. I didn't think, like, when they mentioned the purple Enterprise, I didn't think we'd actually. Well, actually, no. My first thought was, oh, are we gonna get a cameo? But then when they, said oh, just left immediately, I was like, okay, so we're not. But then when they had found Data's head and Tendi attached it. And we got another reference to where Data was talking about the time he spent in San Francisco or Times Arrow. I call out like that. That was cool. So I guess that parallel dimension that he's from was similar. They still had that Times Arrow incident. But yeah, no, it was pretty interesting. Like Data sort of trying to give Tendi advice and sort of point out when she's being a bit ridiculous. And then at the end, when Mariner met Data and was like, oh, I'm the biggest fan, such a hero. And oh God, what is it? Something about smells where it's like, oh, aren't they we're messing with the Prime Directive because we just humiliated him, and everyone thinks he's a loser, and Data is just like, I do believe that he was considered a loser long before you arrived. And what did Mariner said something like, oh, good one, Data, or like, so yeah, good chemistry. It was just, yeah, so it wasn't, I don't know. I'll have to think about this episode to see. Maybe it will become one of my favorites of the show. Because I just think it is, it's kind of simplistic in its approach. But it's funny. It's got good character moments. And it's kind of a heartwarming story. And it's got a lot of funny references. So, I mean, what more could you want for Lower Decks? And then, of course, the solution at the end. And I like how Data came up with this idea to make T'Lyn and Tendi. Like, again, that was kind of heartwarming that they made them both the science officer. So does that mean they're part of the senior staff now? Are they like senior staff members? That would be interesting. Or maybe, I mean, they already treat all four of them like they're already senior staff members, but still, I don't know. It does seem like a big promotion. I don't know how that works having two science officers, but I mean, that makes sense as like their team. And I love, T'Lyn T'Lyn's reaction when Mariner's like, "Are you okay with this, T'Lyn?" She's like, "Yes, I do believe that we have become a very good team, or work well together, complement each other," or something like that. And that was nice. Again, it was kind of heartwarming to see the friendship, because if you think back to when T'Lyn first joined the Cerritos, she was like, kind of almost had a Tuvok and Neelix vibe between her and Tendi, where Tendi is like, "I want to be friends," and she's just like, I do not share your enthusiasm," or whatever, and seemed to like not like her. So it's actually kind of heartwarming to see how far they've grown, and like to see when, of course, T'Lyn was talking about her shortcomings, saying, "I do not believe I deserve to be science officer because I do not know how to get along with people as well as you do," and just so them coming to the realization that they complement each other. So it does. I love that solution, and in fact, I kind of saw it coming when they asked, Tendi showed up at the bar, and Rutherford asked her, "Oh, so did you get promoted?" And she's like, "No, we both got promoted." Like, I saw that one coming, but I think that's because it's a good solution. Like, it makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, I think this is a really good episode. So my rating for Fully Dilated, out of 10, I'm gonna be so bold to give this episode a 9. Excellent. I was thinking of giving it an 8, but the more I talk about it, the more I like it. Now, it is foreseeable, it's plausible that I might change my mind later on. Maybe I'm just being a bit overzealous at the moment. I mean, this happens when I review episodes immediately after watching it for the first time, but maybe not. Maybe I will maintain this 9, because it was simplistic in its approach, and it wasn't like a laugh fest, but it was like the jokes felt really good, and they felt natural, except for the whole licking the console thing. That was a bit over the top, but all the stuff with Mariner, it was hilarious, and the Tendi and T'Lyn storyline, even though it was kind of a little bit cliche as they're competing for the same job, I liked the way it was done, even though Tendi, of course, did get over the top, but that's within her character as well. And of course, have freaking Data, even though it was from a parallel universe, because at this point in stage, Data is actually dead, because this is taking place after Nemesis, so it would have to be from a parallel universe or the past or something like that. But that I love how I always talk about the purple Enterprise. And it's like, well, what color would your Enterprise be? It was just a natural humor, a good sort of. I never liked Carbon Creek, but I would compare it more to the Blink of an Eye episode, and all the Inner Light references were just hilarious. So I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. So that is it for my review of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5, Episode 7. Thanks so much for watching. I will be back next week as I continue to cover Lower Decks. Only 3 episodes left in the entire show. That's very heartbreaking, but hopefully they'll be really good ones. Anyway, so be sure to check out my channel as I continue to cover Lower Decks and Star Trek Next Generation and Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.